welcome back to Dr. Mandy Unedited. I'm Dr. Mandy, and I am a researcher and academic editor who wants to help you figure out how to research. I am sat here in I guess, the cold, rainy last days of May in the UK. If you don't know, I moved to the UK a few years ago from the US, and I love everything about the UK except, look, I cannot make my peace with the weather. The weather just gets under my skin a little bit. And so for the past month, it's actually been quite warm and sunny here, which is a little bit unusual. And as I was really starting to enjoy it, I saw on the news somebody say something about like, oh, what a terrible drought for these farmers. And so now I just kind of feel bad that I was really excited about those warm sunny days. So hopefully today, it's cold and rainy, but the farmers hopefully got their crops going. But anyway, that's enough about me. Today, what we are going to talk about is the literature review. And we're going to do this in two parts this week. We're going to talk about just how to plan out your literature review. And then in a couple weeks from now, we're going to talk about how to actually write the literature review. Before we get into talking about planning a literature review, let's just talk a little bit about what a literature review is. Okay, so a literature review isn't just a list of everything that's ever been written on your topic. It's a synthesis of a conversation between researchers, a map of what we know, what we don't know, and how your topic fits into everything. So what you're really looking to find in a literature review is that you're going to identify trends, debates, gaps, and patterns. So it's really, really important to be strategic about what you read, how you organize what you're reading, and then how you connect the dots. Now, this is going to be a whole series basically that I want to go over the next several weeks. I want to go over every detail and how to write like a dissertation, but I've chosen to start with a literature review because, first of all, this tends to be where a lot of people start writing their dissertation process. I actually, for my PhD, even before, maybe a year before we got into the dissertation process, I actually had a literature review course where we were required to write about half of our literature review. So this is typically kind of where we start besides, developing our research questions and problem and purpose statements and all that good stuff. But it's difficult because this is where you kind of get the least amount of guidance from your school and just kind of like in general, but this is also where you have the most amount of information and you have to use the most amount of brain power. So I think when it comes to a literature review, people often get really kind of confused about how to complete it all the way to the end. And most of the time, it's just, having difficulty planning, organizing, and then understanding how to critically analyze and synthesize your information. So we're going to talk about all that good stuff over the next few weeks. If you have already started your literature review, you still might find this stuff helpful, but I'm going to kind of come at it from a standpoint of that we haven't really started it yet. Okay, so a couple of tips before you get started. First of all, check with your school to see if there is any kind of courses like through your library or through like your research department and how to use academic databases. Some schools do offer tutorials on how to use those things, and so I would highly recommend trying that out before you do anything else because academic databases, sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to maneuver their way around, okay? The next thing is keep your questions, your research questions, your problem and purpose statement in front of you as you're working on this entire process. So just open up a Word document, copy and paste your research questions, your problem and purpose statements, and just look at those. Like as you're writing, just look at those like every once in a while, just to keep like everything fresh in your mind, what your purpose is, what you're going for. And this way it's going to help you really, really, really pinpoint your topic and not get off on too many tangents. Okay, now we're going to start looking and gathering for literature for, what we might use in our literature review. So first of all, you want to identify keywords that you can find in your research question. Maybe you already have a title for your topic, but you want to, yeah, identify what those key words that you're going to be searching are. And it's important to also think of synonyms for these words, okay? So if you have, for example, the word teacher in your topic or your research question, a good synonym for teacher is educators. So when we're searching for documents to include in our literature review, it's important that we, exhaust every corner of the internet basically. And so making sure that we have like those synonyms in mind is really, really helpful to make sure that we haven't left anything out. Once we've identified those keywords, next we want to kind of define what is going to be the inclusion and exclusion criteria for our literature. This is going to validate keeping the papers that you find or not keeping the papers that you find for your literature review. And so some inclusion or exclusion criteria might be dates, the discipline, the method, etc. And again, it's just kind of important to consider these things so that you don't really get too far off topic. Okay, next is we're going to set up a citation manager. A citation manager is basically just a really great tool that you can use to put all of your papers in one place and organize them as needed. I personally like Zotero. That's it's spelled Zotero.org. This one is, I believe it's still completely free. It was completely free when I used it a few years ago, but this one is really, really great because it has an app to it. So I really liked having the ability to have not only, like notes and highlights and organization out of this program, but also if I was on the go and I needed to look up something really quick in one of my papers, I could just open the app on my phone and look at a paper instead of having to, wait until I get home to check my computer. So having a citation manager, again, is really, really important to have all your papers in one place. I know that for some of us, technology might be a little bit intimidating and we just want to keep everything in maybe like a folder on our computer. But trust me, if you take some time, I will be talking about a lot of technological tools today. If you take some time just to like check these things out, it will really, really help you enhance your, your organization, your searching, and your writing. So don't be afraid to check some of these things out, to toggle around with them. I know they might seem intimidating at first if you haven't used them, but it really will just take you beyond trying to, organize a bunch of papers in a folder on your computer. Okay. So other citation managers that people really like is Mendeley, and there's also Notation or Obsidian. Along with a citation manager, you might also want to consider setting up some sort of reference maker. You could do this maybe through a website like Scribr. I know that some of the citation managers, they do actually make references, but I think like it's just touchy, between which one is like the most accurate, because I feel like a lot of citation managers and reference makers are not necessarily the most accurate. So I like to find whichever one is like, the best. And then I always go back and check those references to make sure that they are compliant with, whatever format I'm using, such as APA 7 or MLA. But it is important to have some sort of reference list as you're going, because I see a lot of people who don't keep track of their reference lists, and it's very obvious because they have a lot of citations in your writing that are not in the reference list, and vice versa. There's a lot of references that are not used in a citation list. So make sure you are keeping up with your papers and keeping up with the references as you go along. Let's talk academic databases. So there's several academic databases out there. You have ERIC, you have JSTOR, you have Scopus. But if you still find the academic databases a little bit intimidating, there's always a good old Google Scholar, okay? So if you're struggling with academic databases, I think like Google Scholar is like a really good way to start. And then as Google Scholar kind of directs you to those other academic databases, then you can kind of gently get into them. Also consider, take a little time to look up if there are discipline-specific academic databases, such as ones like if you are doing a topic in education, there might be education ones. There's definitely like medical ones and science ones. So keep that in mind, the whole, like, the whole arsenal of databases that you have. Once you start searching for papers in these academic databases, make sure in like your citation manager, or you can just make like a good old spreadsheet, is depending how many lists you want to have to keep track of. Make sure you're keeping notes on each thing. And we're not necessarily to like the reading part of this yet, but yeah, maybe take a little peruse of like the abstract or the summary, and take notes about like, the major themes that you're seeing, the major methods that you're seeing. Also, yeah, like back to like that inclusionary and exclusionary, take notes on like if it's something that you're going to include, if it's a maybe, if it's a maybe, why is it a maybe? And then if you feel like it's something that you're going to exclude, then you can just go ahead and kick it out. We don't need to hoard papers here. And as you do this process, you're going to start you're going to start seeing like those key papers pop up. And so something that might be like considered a key paper is probably when you're going to start seeing like the same author a lot writing on like this a same topic. You're going to see maybe papers that have very similar words, keywords to the topic that you're working on. Keep an eye out for those key papers, because the next step is that you really want to, yeah, again, exhaust all of the literature, search every corner of the internet to find anything that is, potentially related to your topic. And so once you've kind of identified key papers, you can now start to conduct backward reference searches, which is, the papers that are cited in your key papers. So you can take a look at, what that author cited and see if those papers are relevant to your study. You could also conduct a forward reference search, which is basically finding newer papers that cited those key papers that you found. And one last step to exhausting your search for literature is, of course, you can use AI tools. All right, so first of all, let's talk a little bit about AI. AI is not meant to be used in any way, shape, or form to write any part of your paper, your dissertation, your literature review. That is absolutely unacceptable. And guess what? We can tell, like, as cool as AI is, like, it's not that brilliant that, we can't tell fake from the real thing. Okay, absolutely do not use this to write, but use AI tools strategically throughout this process. Another warning I'm going to give you about AI is that AI is not perfect. Okay, so sometimes it like gets a lot of sources from the internet to give you one consolidated answer. But if you think about the internet, it really can be like it's getting its source from some guy on Reddit sometimes, okay? So when you get an answer from AI, it's really important that you actually double check that answer. Okay, so some AI tools that might help you find if you're struggling for sources, these guys might help you out. Okay, the first one that I really like is illicit.org. It's spelled elicit.org. This tool is actually specifically built for literature reviews, so you can ask it your research question, and it will pull up relevant studies. It will summarize key findings and methodologies, and so I really like that ability to have, like multiple papers in front of you and then just ask like, okay, like what's the common findings here? What is the common themes going on? Another one that I have used before is connected papers, which is perfect for when you want to find, if maybe you have like one good like key paper and you want to find others like it. You can also like, it creates like a visual graph, I believe, of related research. So you can kind of see who's building off of who, which I think is like really useful sometimes, again, to kind of like identify who those key players are in your topic. And at this point, if you haven't found like all the literature in the world, then I don't know what else to do. I'm just kidding. But once you've kind of like, yeah, like you've looked at all the databases, you've looked at all the discipline specific databases, and you've looked, maybe used some AI to help you find anything else that you might be missing. Now you want to narrow down what is going to be those selected papers for your literature review. And so you are probably aiming towards, I want to say like 60 or 80 to start. And then as you're writing, you're probably, probably going to think like, oh yeah, I didn't think of this one area I didn't search. And, you might add a few more papers along the way. Again, it is also up to your school. Some schools have an amount that they would like to see in your literature review. So make sure that you check that. Make sure your literature is recent. Okay, so you want to shoot for like the last 5 years or so. Don't depend too much on literature that is old, because that just simply means that there's developments that could have happened in the time since that research has been conducted. And sometimes if you have a hot topic, like, maybe something on, yeah, like digital technology or COVID or something like that, a lot of times, 5 years is not even enough time for it to become irrelevant. You know what I mean? Sometimes, stuff is becoming irrelevant within a couple of years. So it's really important just to have the most recent literature that you can have. And when I say literature, I mean peer-reviewed academic journals and scholarly books. Do not use websites, y'all. I see that quite a bit in my editing. When you're going to use a website, websites are really only appropriate for specific purposes, such as if you may be searching, for like a specific, or you're writing about like a specific place, and that place has a website, then you can use that website to, maybe you need to talk about the history of that place, or, how many people work at that place if you're, talking about like a participant pool or something. But if you are, trying to state facts, you really don't need to be using websites that have, blogs or just like kind of casual articles to back up your data, because yeah, it's not research, it's not scientific, it's not peer reviewed, and it kind of invalidates your research in that way. And as you're wrapping up finding literature, ask yourself before you just decide like, okay, I'm ready to go on to the next step, ask yourself, have you found enough literature? Have you thought of every possible avenue? Have you, thought of every possible topic before you say, okay, I've got all the papers that I need. But once you feel like you've got all the papers that you need, now it's time for the fun part, which I guess is going to be reading. I am being 1000% sarcastic about that. Reading articles can be a challenge. I know for myself that I have a really difficult time reading articles. And so before we get into talking about some things to look out as you're reading, let's talk about some ways that you can read articles. And yes, this is about to be another discussion on technological tools. So, personally, for me, again, I've got the ADHD, so it's really difficult for me to just like sit down and read, and like having to read things on like a black and white paper is really difficult for me. I think, like, for most of my life, people in school and stuff, whenever I've had like an assignment where I've had to read and then like write something like a critical analysis of it, the comment has always been that my comprehension is not there. And so, thank God I live in this era where we have these tools. The first one I'm going to talk about is Speechify. This is a text to speech tool. And of course, there's probably some more like economic friendly ones out there, and some easier to use ones out there. But I think this one is fun because this is actually a website that has many different AI generated voices, but they're like from famous voices. So it has voices like Mr. Beast, it has The Rock, it has Snoop Dogg, it has J-Lo, and a lot of other, like just tons of celebrity voices. And you could actually put your paper on the website, or it has like an app, and I think it has like an extension and all that good stuff. And these voices will read the paper for you. And personally, I like there's a Barack Obama voice. I like Barack Obama to read my papers, so I just find his voice so soothing. I find this really, really helpful listening to your papers, especially if you're somebody that is like on the go and you don't really necessarily have time just to sit and read. I know for myself, I'm just like, oh, I could be doing so much more stuff, like just like sitting still and reading. And so, yeah, being able to listen to papers. If you're not into listening to papers and you want to try to read papers, but maybe, you've got a little trouble with that, there are actually a few different fonts out there today that can maybe help you out a little bit. So, one font that I really like, that again has like an extension that you could put on your web browser, so it will actually like change all the words on the web page to this font. And it also does it, I think, for like Word and other stuff, but it's called Hyperbold. It's sometimes also known as Half Bold. And so this is a font where the first half of the word is actually bold, and then the second half of the word is not. So hyperbold or half bold, I think, is really helpful. There's also another one called Open Dyslexic, and so this one is obviously made for people with dyslexia, but it has the bold part is on the bottom of the word, and then the top part of the word is skinny. So I've used this one too. I mean, I don't have dyslexia myself. Maybe, other people would think that this one's more helpful. Personally, I prefer Hyperbold, but Open Dyslexic is also another really great tool. But once you've figured whatever your reading vibe is going to be, I do want to say start thinking critically about your papers. We're going to talk in the next episode a little bit more about critical analysis, but you probably have already started percolating this concept in your brain. And as you're reading, you do want to start thinking about how you're going to discuss these papers. And so, as you're reading, it's important to like think critically and think about, comparing methods, comparing findings, identifying, various theoretical frameworks. It's also important to think about where are the gaps, where are the contradictions, where are the unexplored areas. So go ahead and start like waking up that critical analysis bit of it as you're reading. And once you have read all those papers and you are just thinking, oh, thank goodness I've made it all the way through, it's over. I'm sorry, it's not over. You've actually got a lot more to do. But congratulations, you've read the paper at least once. But now, anyway, you're going to want to start to sort those papers into maybe like 3 to 5 major themes that you've kind of found throughout these papers. And this is kind of like, getting ready to go towards like what might be your level 2 headings when you get to like that review of literature section. But once you've kind of figured out what these like 3 to 5 major themes are, then go ahead and write just like a little baby outline for each of those themes. And you just want to note down what are some of the sub themes that you're seeing in these major themes. And again, this is like kind of starting to help us develop the major topics that we're going to be writing about in our review of literature section. Now that we have thought about those major themes, let's get into actually writing like a really comprehensive outline. And so writing this outline in this way is really going to help us like have that clear path. I think that's where a lot of people kind of go missing in the literature review and start to feel really stuck and not know where to go, is because they don't lay out a really clear path for themselves. I know that like I can be guilty of just kind of like winging it and going along with the flow. But I've found, planning out the trip before you go on it can help you not to get lost. So now let's go ahead. We just want to start out with like a basic outline. And now we're talking about like the overall chapter of the literature review. And so in our basic outline, we're just simply going to include, the introduction, the theoretical framework, the review of literature section, of course, and the conclusion. And so, yeah, once again, check your school's guidelines. Sometimes there's other sections. Sometimes, there's a search strategy section where schools want you to state, all of the words that you searched, all of the databases that you used. And then sometimes, schools have like maybe actually like a separate gap section where, it asks you to point out all the gaps. But for right now, we're starting out with the basics: introduction, theoretical framework, review of literature, conclusion. Bam. Okay, what we're going to do now is just add bullet points with key info into your intro, your theoretical sections, and for your conclusion. And I know with like the intro and the conclusion, those are, probably going to be 2 things that you're going to be doing very last. So, it doesn't have to be quite so in depth with those sections at the moment, but it's still good just to kind of, just for the flow of your paper, you can see what's going on. And so make sure when you're adding these bullet points as well, you want to include citations with them. Okay, this is going to be very important for when you get into the thick of writing. You have all the citations right there in your outline, and you, one, don't have to go searching for something to back up what you've just said. And 2, you have a list of citations, because we're going to talk in the next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about synthesis and how when we're writing our paper, we don't want to have, just one citation at the end of every sentence. We're going to synthesize. And so we want to have multiple references that backs up each statement that we make. Okay, so when you're writing your outline, it's important to list all the citations that are relevant to the bullet points that you're putting down. Then we'll get into, the meat and potatoes. We're getting into the review of literature section, which, I guess it could be like, it could be very scary. It could be very scary, but okay, just hold my hand. We're gonna make it through and it's going to be fine. So, first of all, I would suggest, before you get too deep into thinking of this section, is maybe make like a flow chart of maybe topics or papers. And yeah, you can use like your AI as well to help you make these kind of visual charts as well. This will just kind of help us see what the story is going to be in this review of literature section. And it might, if you've already made those like little mini outlines on your themes, it might just help you kind of like fill in some areas, kind of get a little transition going on. And yeah, overall, again, we want to tell a story here. Once we've kind of seen what's going on in that visual map, we're just going to input, well, those 3 to 5 major themes, those many outlines that we made on them. We're going to go ahead and plop them in under the review of literature section. And so, yeah, again, like this is becoming like your level 2 headings. And then all of the little subtopics that you're going to expand upon are becoming, your level 3, 4, 5, and beyond headings, okay? So take some time, create bullet points for, each part, probably start with like 3 to 5 bullet points for, every theme, every sub-theme, and again, make sure that you are adding your citations. And then once you got all that down, look, you might be ready to actually write a literature review, which is, it's really exciting, and hopefully you feel like a little bit more confident at this point. But before, you think that you are ready to go into that next step, just take a second and check over, your whole outline and make sure that the story flows the way that it should. If not, go back and think about some parts that have some little gaps that you might need to fill in. But other than that, all right, let's get to writing. Okay, next week's episode is at one time that I wanted to quit my PhD and why it became the biggest life lesson ever for me. And then the next week, so not next week, but the week after next, we will be talking about part 2 of the literature review. And so guess what, y'all? If you need a little extra help with this literature review, I've actually published on my website a how to write your literature review in 90 days. So this is just a guide that goes over all the stuff that we went over today, but as well, the writing part, it shows you week by week what you need to concentrate on to, stay on task and get everything done. And yeah, it's available on the media page of my website at www.drmandyedits.com. And if you need some help with writing, if you need some coaching, if you need some editing, let me know. You can get a hold of me through the website, but you can also get a hold of me at mandykf@gmail.com. That's mandiekf@gmail.com. And then if you just want to see what I'm doing on social media, because I'm always doing a lot of really special and random things, you could check out my link tree in the description below. It's been really great talking to you guys about this. I hope that you feel a little bit more confident about going in and getting that literature review conquered. In the meantime, make sure you eat something today, stay warm, stay happy, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.